But before we do any of that, we're going to just take a look back, being ourselves looking at rugby, as we say, through the lens of Leinster and Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
The domestic season finished for the Celtic nations and Italy.
South Africa.
No,
Some South African
really.
teams.
But the domestic season finished at the weekend with a great final in Celtic Park between Glasgow and Leinster. And Leinster booking trends as they do, got it done, despite my thought that they wouldn't, and you said Leinster, but you ruled with your heart. You were very much on the fence. You did one of those head says, heart says kind of gibberish predictions.
I get you don't get very far going against Leinster though in these kinds of scenarios. They tend to be the safer bet, and it proved so there. It was kind of weird, odd, little ironic justice that, or not even justice really, it was Glasgow conditions that ultimately did for Glasgow in the second half, like pure rain rugby, which is just part of the course over there. But they're very adjusted to playing on that fast track, like we were highlighting before the game, the slick surface for running rugby in all kinds of weather. And even though the football pitch looked in great nick, it just meant when the rains came, they didn't have. It basically ultimately showed that they just didn't have other ways of playing as many as Leinster have.
They had some purchase in the early part of the first half with their kicking game. It just felt in that early stage of the game as if this pitch, maybe it was my imagination, but the pitch seemed so much wider than a normal rugby pitch.
There's definitely a lot of grass was found with kicks from both sides as well. Yeah,
especially Glasgow earlier doors, where Stuart Hogg was getting great purchase out of those long kicks. But the pitch just looked so large that the ball was just never going dead.
Yeah, there were long periods of possession and long periods of play. It was lovely. People were saying it wasn't that absorbing a contest. I thought it was a great final, to be honest. I thought it had its twists and turns, had its strike at the beginning, and then Glasgow giving that score right back. There were many moments to regret from a Glasgow point of view, to be honest. When you look back on it, and on second viewing, I was just more impressed with Leinster's performance than on first viewing, because you're kind of in the heat of watching a final, it's always easy to be just some oversight of some really stellar stuff that you didn't necessarily pick up on, and then upon repeat viewing, you seen super elite defence, a lot of the scramble that was going on in Leinster. A lot of Robbie Henshaw's dominant tackles to centres. In the first viewing, I was critical of Gary Ringrose for he did shoot up and miss some tackles, but the net result is kind of, if you're going to miss big, because it's going to force them in, and he wasn't missing anyone where it was him and no one.
It did cost him on a couple of occasions. It's certainly better to stick those.
It is for sure, but I just those are more prone to happen when you're flying up and being in the face, and those two centres do take a very responsible role, and a direct responsible role in how Leinster's defence operates and shuts teams down.
But there's no question that I think it was a combination of Leinster's defence and their pack that won them the game.
Yeah.
The pack probably didn't get as much purchase from the referee as they deserved.
Yes.
But the defence did a great job, and
against a team like Glasgow, who, as we were saying, super attacking side. They set a record this season for the most try bonus points in Celtic League history. They
unsurprisingly
loads of try bonus points. So
16 in the regular season, which is 21 games.
Pretty unheard of. But this is why it's, again, as the rains come down,
finals footy in wet weather conditions is a different game.
It's true, and you need to be able to play in it. And to be honest, it's critical of Dave Rennie, and I don't want to do that because I think he's splendid and he's perfect for this Glasgow team, and I hope they persist with him. But this will definitely sting, because going back to his time at the Chiefs as well, they would play probably the most spectacular rugby of the whole season and of any of the teams in it, but then ultimately would come across a Crusaders side or some side that would stop them in their tracks. It's a familiar
picture for him. I don't know that he's certainly not at the Super Rugby level or beyond won any silverware for all of his brilliant, delightful rugby,
wonderful rugby.
Silverware still eludes him,
and that's gonna weigh on the mind, to be honest. And it's kind of drawn into focus because I think Leinster Rugby TV were posting a bit. There was a 10-year anniversary of the 2009 victory, which was Leinster's first European victory. And it was it was a load of heads there. You had your Easton C, was your Michael Cheika's, a load of the kind of the diaspora of Leinster, the Leinster alumni getting together. But it's just thinking, there was a lot of reflecting of how much easier it became once you kind of kicked that door down, and then subsequently the subsequent campaigns did seem easier by and large for all of them compared to what they went through in 09. Like, they lost a couple of group games in 09. It was strange that they got as far as they did, and it was stuttering the whole time, with the obvious highlight of the semi-final. But it's just like, once that's in place, the team and the club and the province can kick on, and then all the players, the younger players coming through, have this inherent sense of, we deserve to be in finals footy. We should be. Any season without a trophy is a failure, and that's kind of pretty much been where Leinster have been at since that day. In terms of headspace, whereas this for Glasgow would have felt more like, this is our time to do it. This is like a new, compared to the last team that won it, which played a lot of the same.
But
similar
as is
rugby,
like
but it's different.
This was sort of my mentality. All of what you're explaining was sort of my reasoning going into last week. But ultimately, they as you said, they just don't have enough strings to their bow right now.
There's an important addendum to attach.
It's just a little, like, it was a little note of the naivety of Dave Rennie that I thought was more crucial than people would be let on, was taking off Sam Johnson very early. I think it was still like 49 minutes or something like that for Peter Horne to get the double distributor going on in that weather. I don't like Peter. He obviously had a part to play in that late try, Peter Horne.
They took that try very well collectively.
He was a good impact man to bring on for sure, but I think taking off Sam Johnson at that period, assuming he wasn't injured, I don't think he was, I haven't heard that he was a little bit naive, and I think wrong. And I think in those conditions he did need that fronting up to Robbie Henshaw and maybe making a few dominant tackles and wrestling the ball back. That the presence of Sam Johnson should have stayed on the pitch. He's been a big part of
what they've done.
They've done this year. And I thought that was if it was an injury, it was a big loss, and if it was a tactical decision, it was a mistake, I think.
It's probably a fair call. There were obviously a few other moments that Glasgow would like to have back. We were talking about their halfbacks going in, and Hastings will want that play back before in the first half, where he could have just given a pass. There were actually three receivers on, and only James Lowe as a defender outside.
It was great hustle D initially in that play. This was just after, just before the Cian Healy try. So it was 7-5, or was it 7-all or
7-5?
7-5, to Glasgow. And then they got an attack going, and they got through on the left hand side and got a floated pass out to DTH, and looked like he was going to go in. And Leinster did a great piece of scramble defending, managed to just about hold them off. Their fringe defence then stood them up and stayed tight as Glasgow sort of eked their way infield. Leinster's D just wasn't giving them an inch. They were going to have to earn their score. And then finally they did do a little subtle play. They moved it out, and Adam Hastings had a screenplay in front of him where both options, the narrow option and the wide option, would have been a try, and he just couldn't get the pass away in time. Got smacked with a big tackle, and then the chance was over, and it was a penalty. They had a penalty advantage,
which they kicked.
Which, I think, compounding the mistake, having not got the try that was there for them, they decided just to take 3 and move on. 10-5 lead on paper. All your commentators would say that's the wise and sensible decision, but as it stood, it was just a sigh of relief from Leinster. It relieved the pressure valve that was on them. It kept it a 1-score game, and Leinster went up the other end of the pitch.
Scored the try, took the lead.
The try, took the lead, got their pack going forward, and Glasgow, as you say, they went through from that point a period of 52 minutes.
Well, that's the thing, is like the rain came down in the second half, so there's that recognition of like the first half, the conditions were there to play that rugby, and they did earn their score, and it was just a pass away, and they didn't make the pass.
And then when they didn't make the pass, they decided that was the opportunity gone. We're just going to take 3,
which is wrong-headed. And there's obviously all of those decisions have to be reviewed on a case-by-case thing. Maybe they didn't know, although I think that the weather was going to change to take a turn for the worse in the way that it did, or that conditions were going to deteriorate to that point. But they should have been appreciating that like scores and chances in general against a team like Leinster in a final are going to be few and far between, and they built their whole identity on being a try scoring team, that like for them to have success against Leinster, it needs to be them playing their game, and that involves them scoring tries. But it doesn't worry them as much, Leinster, because Leinster can score tries too.
They have become used to the idea of just having so many opportunities in a game and being so creative. And then what came in the second half, which was Leinster controlling the game, playing it in the right areas of the field, slowing everything up and really strangling Glasgow. They just couldn't cope, and then it only probably occurred to them late on in the game that that potential try could have done us a huge favour.
Indeed, yeah.
They showed a lot of good guts finally on Glasgow. They did show a lot of guts to come back and score that stellar try.
And Tickers in that it was against the 14 men, but it was executed perfectly.
Yeah.
Pulled them left and right. Spotted that Larmer was covering the backfield and was kind of probing across. Went blind again and found the space across there, executing perfectly. Like they're such a capable team. They're the two deserving finalists in the context of this league this year. Glasgow were well worthy of their place, and Leinster generally are so good at recognising like moments to put teams away. Never managed to do that to this Glasgow team. There were chances for them. There were some of Nigel's refereeing in the context of that scrum. That repeat scrum thing could have changed the picture, but the story stands that Leinster had their moments. There was that Gary Ringrose break that he and Lowe failed to link up and finish properly, but even without putting them away, it still felt like Leinster were the more controlled, calm team in the
they could have been made through that. There's certainly some errors in it, but I think that the overall arching narrative picture is awesome defending when Glasgow had the ball in that first half for large parts. The scramble D was on point. The centres were defending really strongly. They weren't, after that initial try, which was a combination of really some sloppy plays and some almost looking like the Bulls a little bit, just looking detached and missing and soaking tackles and just not being in the right headspace. But really, after they conceded that try, in terms of defending, they didn't put too many feet wrong. They were very focused and very physical and completed tackles and kept their shape,
and were mostly making dominant hits both on and off the ball. To be honest, the contact zone was mainly Leinster's, which we were suspecting would be the case.
And that defensive pressure from Luke McGrath gives rise to that Gary Ringrose tries, and those are the breaks when you play with that focus and intensity. And it was a case of Hogg just losing focus for a moment, and no one from Leinster doing that.
It was a poor set from Glasgow as well, and it wasn't the only time. That their subsequent exit as well. It was they were going crazy infield, needless fades.
They had been getting a lot of success from finding grass, because I think the pitch was much bigger than usual. And I think that they were going for that long Hogg boot, and they wanted to give him a bit of space to do that. But it
became telegraphed
because it was so quick.
Defenders onto him.
Because it was so quick, they couldn't get blockers in place, and then Luke McGrath just runs up, and Hogg already has quite a low trajectory on his long kicks. So it ended up not working for them.
No.
But a great little play from Luke McGrath, and one of the interesting things that Johnny Sexton was saying post-match was that Lancaster had been talking to them. His big focus on the week of was defending, but he had also spoken to Leinster after that Saracens game that it's not about winning every moment. It's about winning the big moments, and that seemed to resonate through the team. I think Sexton mentioned it a couple of times anyway. And I just think it's a good reminder. Like, I think champion teams need to have that mindset in them and need to have that instilled in them, that there are huge important moments, and it's definitely a very good pressure relief for those players to be getting that message that no, you don't have to win every moment. It's not a disaster if you don't win every moment, especially going into the Ireland team in the context of the World Cup. Just being able to exhale a little bit, and if things go wrong,
it means you can react to a mistake or just a shift in momentum in the game. You can allow for that. You need to have your eyes open, and it's a next play mentality where it's like the next play could be the match defining.
We're not controlling every minute, but in the crucial moments we're going to find and make the plays, and that's a big attitude.
Context of defence as well, and even in the context of Ringrose and Henshaw and just how dominant they were. They lovely probing they were Leinster in possession, and then Johnny Sexton puts a lovely kick down the tram lines that has to be gathered by I think it was Seymour, who's then Kearney and Fardy patiently wait for him to get up to pick him, drive him over the line. Hogg peels away with the ball, and he's in his own in goal area, but you know how dangerous Hogg is from there. He could. We've seen him do before, where he dances out past the 22 and turns that into.
Alex good at the weekend.
Can do. But there's a chance, there's scope for players like that to do that. But the first thing that would happen was Gary Ringrose was in his face, forced him to make a pass infield, still in the in-goal area, and Robbie Henshaw just absolutely smashed. And then the 5 metre scrum. Those are really good pressure, applying pressure in the right areas, asking the right questions, forcing Glasgow to play from there. Hogg is dangerous, sure, but it's easier to.
That was the story of the second half. I mean, it adjusted. In the first half, it was much more ebb and flow. Nobody was really in top in terms of the kicking game. But like the big moment of that half, you would say, would be Cian Healy's try, where Leinster just controlled possession and used that physicality and strength. And Glasgow, again, for all of their techers, they are a good team. They do have a very good, solid pack, but they couldn't cope strength-wise with what Leinster were bringing them. It was just quick, it was controlled, but it was also drilled and routine, and they knew exactly what they were doing. And then when Cian Healy gets on the ball with Scott Fardy driving behind him, they just couldn't stop them, and that was a huge moment for Leinster, just taking the game to the area that they know they have the strength. And then obviously they have that lead. They took 3-pointers when they were on offer. I think it was a 15-10 at half time. Exactly. They got another 3-pointer to go ahead.
In the first half they did. The second half they didn't as much.
But the point about what they did in the second half is that they changed the game and just, in those wet weather conditions, played perfect, controlling footy. I think that the second half is really where Sexton, from an attacking perspective, I think he defended pretty well all day. But from an offensive perspective, he really came into his own. And he was shifting the play. He was calling everything. He was moving Glasgow around, deciding where Leinster were going to play the ball and putting glorious little kicks in behind.
By contrast, the Hastings kind of went anonymous in that half, and then Ali Price came off early on as well, and for little George Horn, and it was very much head scratching, trying to change things for Glasgow because it was slipping away, and there was a sense that they kind of just didn't make a good enough account of themselves in the first half.
It's not just that, like, Glasgow will bounce back. The prospect of Aaron Cruden is a great one.
That's true.
Because for all of it, I don't feel particularly comfortable critiquing Adam Hastings just because he's had such a great 2019 so far. And he's a kid. He should be an understudy.
This is true.
If he was was coming up in Leinster, he wouldn't be the guy we're hanging our hopes on. He would be Sexton's understudy
for sure.
And that's
that is a telling factor in this final. Like it's not to throw shade on him, but you're talking about like the contrast between him and Sexton and what happens when the rain comes down in these finals as well, all that experience. It's just you're right in saying he should have someone more experienced there, and someone who's not going to alter the style of play, not going to be at odds with how he plays the game.
Totally.
Which is Aaron Cruden fits that mold perfectly.
Like
a running 10, who's a bit more experienced, got a Kiwi head on him. That should be perfect for that guy. And the sky's the limit for him because he really is quite talented. He seems to have all the skills. And Ali Price capable of controlling games as well. This is just one of those ones where it didn't happen at his speed, so he was kind of a bit more absent than he has been in previous weeks, which is a shame from Glasgow's point of view. But
Luke McGrath, by contrast, did have a big game.
He did have a big game. His defence is always very stellar. Very stellar.
But he controlled things well. It was more his tempo, just because of the rain. And he box kicked better. But one of the things that Leinster will obviously ultimately be very happy with, I've heard people describe it like it's a very impressive win. It's a reassuring win from Leinster's perspective, just because we talk about tactics and everything else, but Leinster's base is a lot higher than everyone else, and there's their standard of that pack in particular. I keep banging on the drum, but Cian Healy is so far ahead of any other loose head in Europe that it's kind of farcical. And he was brilliant again this weekend. Delighted to see a front row forward win man of the match.
That was excellent.
Thoroughly deserved.
And
in fact, not as we were about to get into, not as generously rewarded by Nige as it should have been.
Probably
but,
true. But even outside of the scrum, though, his carrying was stellar. His defensive breakdown was awesome, as it always is. But then the point with Leinster is that it's not just him. It was like Ty Furlong was making dominant hits. Jack Conan was making
Reece Ruddock had a big game.
All of them step up and carry all the time, which makes it so hard to target players, which is what packs are likely to do in the event coming up.
They've definitely rebounded, and it helps that they've got a few guys back and fit. But the presence of Reece Ruddock in the team, in particular from a carrying perspective, and then the prominence of Cian Healy coming in that carry game has helped a lot. Because one of the things we were saying last October was that when Toulouse kind of did a job on Leinster by just man marking James Ryan, and they were kind of caught with their pants down, that they had been leaning on him a lot for go forward.
For
sure. But it wasn't really the case again today. At the weekend there was a lot more diversity to what Leinster were doing within their forward pack, and it was just too much, too strong, but also just very tackerful as well, just in those tight moments.
They were narrow. There were many times when Leinster as a whole were narrow, and the whole team were within 15 yards of the ruck either side, but it didn't really matter. They were still flooding the same channel with 2 or 3 options, all of whom are ready and willing to take the ball.
It's a critique when it's not the right way to play a certain team.
Yeah.
Like when you watch Ireland do that against Wales, you're pulling your hair out. But it's the way to play Glasgow for this Leinster team. It's just 100% where you need to take that game in those conditions on that occasion.
For sure.
That's what you do. And that's what makes Leinster so great, is that they can take games to different places.
That's it. Yeah, it's a great luxury to have. Because you look at so many quality teams that you really, really want to do well, but ultimately they're found wanting for a bit of nous and a bit of adjustment on the fly. You see in both of the semi-finalists in the Premiership showed signs of that as well. Northampton and Gloucester respectively just don't have a game plan that can go with what that is. It's only going to be a shootout and they're only going to lose. And that was like, compare that to Leinster, who have literally gone seasons playing different ways. This season looked different from last season as well, but you feel like there's an archive and a memory, and they collectively know when a game is in a certain place, what to kind of do instinctively. And you see some of the like, even when they're a 15 is named, which only has a handful of starters and a few of the young academy lads, you still get the sense that collectively they kind of are on the same page with where they want to take a game, and that can be any number of ways.
So it's a huge win for Leinster. They'll be delighted with it. A lot better ring to it than two defeated semi-finals.
Two lost finals would not be good for
No, it would be all too Claremont. And it's a good little championship credential for them, and they are the second best team in Europe.
So it's good. It's right and proper that they're champions, although unlucky Glasgow. But the other note you're talking about is Nige.
Well, Nigel Owens has been one of the best refs in the world. I defend him to the hilt. They just have a lot of critics, but there's no question that his refereeing has been a big talking point. And of course, the Glasgow fans, who were very generous to us in terms of their comments and likes in the week running up to this, we were quite generous to them with our predictions. We really did think they were going to do a job, but Leinster got it done. But they have sort of
some bones.
So a lot of people. Well, no, I don't. This is my point: is that they have leaned in on this Nigel thing. And I don't think that that's fair. I don't think that Nigel... the first thing I'd say is that I don't think his refereeing affected the results one way or the other. No. I think if you do think that, you're really reaching. You're seeing one half of the mistakes and not seeing the other half.
Because there were plenty, and that's what I was saying. It's just leniency overall.
Well, I've got it down to 2 errors that he's really struggling with at the moment, and I actually think one is bigger than the other. I think the first is leniency, and that's actually my less big one, but it's obviously what
but it's at odds with what World Rugby are saying and releasing as well a lot of the time. In the context of high tackles and collisions, he's always one for the mitigating factors compared to the aggravating factors or whatever. And he does just want to play on as best as he can. He wants to look for any excuse he can to play on, regardless of the circumstances. And that meant that the Fraser Brown incident, where he hit Luke McGrath off the ball in the first half, probably by the letter of the law, a yellow card. Most other refs are giving a yellow card. He said that he thought that Luke
McGrath, it was a cheap shot to the back of a player who's toes in it. It was completely
But it really would hurt. Nigel's verbals in that is well, he thought he had the ball. It's Nigel, you don't know what he thought. But that is just an example of him looking for anything that he can get to
that incident, that was actually a pretty nasty shot. It was completely blindsided Luke McGrath and hurt and stung, and it's a clear yellow card. Likewise, the Rob Kearney incident laid on, which has been covered by the Glasgow fans, was a red card.
It was a red card,
unquestionably. He caught him in the air, head hit the floor, head smacked the ground, dangerous, and one of those Rob just head the ball moments where he just goes charging in and he doesn't know where he is and what he's doing, and he just plows into him in the air, and that's too dangerous. That's a red.
And that's how Stewie Hogg's game and tenure at Glasgow finished prematurely. So it was a justifiable grievance, but it was inconsistent in the context of the game, because Nigel had already been kind of just not basically. It's like one of those when you're looking at underage or something, and the benefit of the doubt is always with the player, and he's trying to keep the game. He's trying to minimise his involvement and intervening in any capacity with the game and the result, which ultimately balances out. And the other in terms of criticising that aspect of his of him consistently being at odds with the other refs, is that he tends to produce better games, less stop-start, and then incidents like
he's been in charge of some of the best games.
Exactly,
that's true. But there is an area, and this is an interesting one, because running rugby is what people want to see, and a lot of people have a beef with scrums, but scrums are great. We're defenders. Scrums are just a brilliant, unique part of rugby union, and they're pretty awesome. And super technical and interesting. And Nige just doesn't seem to give a shit what's going on at them. Like he, again, I have two clear examples of just typical Nige reffing, one either side, that happened in this game. And one of them was when Leinster were, whatever they were, 15 or 18-10 up. I can't quite remember which. I think it was 18-10 at the time. Yeah. And Leinster were camped out, about 60-minute mark, camped out in the Glasgow line. And they got a penalty and they took a scrum or whatever.
They got a penalty from
I think this actually came from the Robbie Henshaw thing that you were describing.
The first thing that happened was penalty at scrum time.
Yeah.
And then Johnny and the team made the decision to go for a scrum again.
And then, like, watching what happened between Cian Healy and I think it was Xander Fagerson still on the field.
There were three consecutive resets, all of which were penalty to Cian.
Xander Fagerson went down onto the ground and Nige says, just a slip, we'll reset. Then Cian Healy gets a huge shove on him, forces him up. He breaks his bind. He loses his position in the scrum and turns in and stands up. Nige says, both stand up, reset. Then there's another slip, another reset, and then the ball goes into the scrum again. Glasgow get a little steady, but it isn't given a chance to push or settle or anything. But the ball gets to the base and Nige says, use it.
Yeah.
I don't like scrums. I don't want to see them. Yeah. And it's really frustrating. I mean, if that scrum is refereed properly, which is fair, it's part of the game. If the loose head is doing a job on the tight head gets punished, the loose head gets rewarded. And that's what was happening there. And that should have been penalty, yellow card, probably penalty try, killing of the game. And Leinster ultimately had to make use of the ball, couldn't really do it, and it was a reprieve for Glasgow, big style.
Leinster ended up dropping the ball. The other more like after that, in the next phase, Luke McGrath dropped the ball after two phases. It was a scrum to Glasgow. They took Cian Healy off. On comes our sub. First engage, penalty Glasgow. Which you're just going, what?
That was a fair
penalty, but you're just going, where's the consistency in that?
That's telling from Leinster's perspective that for all the depth in the world, when Cian Healy goes, their scrum goes to shit. It goes from being the best scrum in Europe to a pretty ropey scrum. Just from taking Cian Healy out of it. So that's obviously a concern. But there was another incident for Glasgow, which was also just a crucial moment.
Having slightly later than this,
having
R22.
Having got the reprieve, they had a scrum in Leinster's 22. I think the score still at 18-10, but earlier in the game with a real chance to make play. And Leinster got a scrum, I think it was, and Glasgow got a huge shove on, huge shove. Leinster tight head, the bench tight head Porter just turns in, bounces up, and Nige instantly from the opposite end of the scrum decides, penalty Leinster, you're not driving straight. And this is Nigel's favourite scrum call that he gives against loose heads all the time. That is almost always complete horseshit. It's just like all you have to do if your tight head is being if you're the tight head and you're being given a rough time, just take a step back and turn in, and Nige will give you a penalty because he's not driving straight. Like, if a loose head gets an advantage on the tight head, listen, if he shifts his hips and angles in towards the hooker, that's not driving straight. Nige couldn't see that, and I don't think that's what was happening in that scrum. I think he got the shove on, got the engage perfect on that on the tight head. And the natural thing that happens when a loose head gets on top of the tight head is that the scrum wheels a bit. It's not deliberately wheeling, it's not necessarily not driving straight. If you're driving straight and you have two props even, and then one prop very dominant over another, the scrum is going to turn a little bit. That's not deliberate wheeling of the scrum. That's good scrummaging, and then you should be watching what the tight head is doing, and if he loses his bind, or if he loses his engage, if he disconnects from the scrum, that's a penalty. And that's 100% what happened at that scrum, and Leinster got a penalty, a nonsense penalty for it, which gave them the exit that ultimately allowed them to take enough time off the clock that Glasgow couldn't get back into the game. So these are huge calls, and it's really frustrating because I like Nigel a lot, and in other general areas of the field, as you say, he makes a big effort to make the game as entertaining as possible. But I think that the scrums are super interesting and great and need to be respected. And the work that props are doing, I mean, they must just be pulling their hair out, because at the end of the day, for all of your work, a lot of the refs just don't give a shit what you're doing, aren't interested, don't know in some cases.
Yes, it seems that.
And like, there are refs who don't even look at the scrum, who are looking at the back line for offside and turn around, the scrum's gone down, we'll just reset. Or the ball's at the 8's feet, just use it. Like, the scrum is a huge part of rugby, and you have to respect it.
It's also the part where the most weight is shit. Like, it's dangerous to do that, and that's my take on it as well. Is like to be not officiating properly, allowing things to like collapse scrums and just saying use it while people are still driving, even though it's someone's on the ground, someone's head's in the dirt, and people are driving, and there's massive men in that scrum. So that's why in my mind it needs to be officiated properly and punished duly and accordingly. If you're being dominated in the scrum, that means it's not up to the ref to make the game flow, and it has to be got as much as you do want. Like, communication is key in that. You want them to contributing. You don't want them just like not communicating with either team.
You don't want them actively destroying the game either.
But sometimes if a team is that dominant, sometimes the penalties are like 12 penalties in a row at scrum time is something that no ref will ever give, even if a team wins 12 consecutive engagements. And it's just, you won't see those penalties coming at all. And then the other thing that I like, and this is kind of conjecture, like I don't think Nigel is is the only one to do this, but it feels like the leniency kind of gets a bit tighter if a team's pulling away, that he's more inclined to ping that team that's in the ascendancy to try and pull the game back into balance.
He always wants the spread to be beaten.
This is it. Good competitive back and forth games, which is what we enjoy watching, and the free flowing element to it is also what we're asking for. So it's kind of it's tough to kind of zero in on where the right balance is, but you're right in saying, and I thought so as well, that Nigel's officiating at scrum time in general shows a lot of this, and at the weekend there were those two prime examples that affected both teams.
So there were two very obvious foul play decisions and two very obvious scrum decisions that were just dead wrong. Dead wrong, 100% incorrect. And it was, as it happens, it was two for each team. The Glasgow critique is just one-eyed. And like, if anybody's bitching about offsides in defence, get over it. Everyone's allowed to be offside all the time. This season that ship has sailed.
Everyone's offside.
You're looking for offside penalties. Are you kidding me? They're just not coming.
They're not coming. I wonder, will they be back for the World Cup with a vengeance?
I don't know. Maybe. And just before we finish up, I just want to say, just mention that the competition as a whole, having finished up, I think it's in a great place. I think it's in a super place.
I think, as I suspected when they were introduced, the two South African teams have added, and the two conference systems kind of system now has added a whole new dimension, an excellent dimension to this competition, because obviously compared to the Premiership and Top Tours, there's no relegation in this one, which is always a slight thrown against it, at kind of diminishing its qualities. But the style of rugby played by pretty much all teams, and then the things like little subplots like the rise of Benetton this year, all excellent for the game.
The absence of the only difference that the absence of relegation even means is that the Cheetahs, Zebra, Dragons, and Kings have been playing dead rubbers for a while. And that's, I mean, it is what it is. I'm not too I'm not too pushed on that. But above them, even Edinburgh and Cardiff and the like they were pushing it right until the end. And I think there's potential for this tournament, the standard of this tournament, to raise, because there's a lot of teams that are just not quite hitting their potential. You think of Ulster, you think of Connacht, you think of Edinburgh, you think of Cardiff. Scarlets as well. Like, there's a load of potential in a load of these teams. I'm excited to see if a few of them can get going, all of a sudden it could be a game changer. It could become a really tough.
Well, it's already hot, but this is the thing. Like the addition of the South African kind of teams from Super Rugby added that kind of open dynamic to it. There was always there in some simmering away in some teams, because Connacht had that renaissance, and Clonethley were in it as well. So it's like, running rugby pays dividends in this league, and so it's encouraged, even though a lot of the teams play in wet weather very often, and you get to see contrasting kind of conditions when you're flicking from one game to the other a lot of the time, particularly now with the South African teams, because they're literally in other season mode sometimes. So it's just an interesting, colourful competition, and at the end of the day, the two right teams got to the final all the way, and if they're going to hopefully, the only thing it's lacking is teams like really doing a job in Europe. But this year you had stories like Edinburgh
finalists.
This is it. It's like this year they did kind of kick on. You had teams like Edinburgh going above and beyond, and then ultimately learning a harsh lesson about fighting on multiple fronts.
Getting punished for it.
In
the league by.
But that's a cool dynamic to see, because then it means there's growth for that team. They have to figure out, why did that happen?
That could be something that hits Benetton next year, because they're competing in the top level of Europe now.
Yes, so you could see them drop off next year in the other comp and make way for. You presume the Welsh teams will be a bit resurgent, probably post World Cup as well. This was a pretty dismal kind of outing for the Welsh regions in a Grand Slam year, which is very strange and contrasting.
But not for Wales.
But not for Wales as a whole.
Yeah.
Everyone knows, this is it.
No, but I mean, just in general, their regions being way worse than their national team is just a long established fact.
That's true. Yeah, no, it's true. But
so the league is in, I think, a very good place. We'd like to see the SAFA teams kick on a bit. And
Cheetahs kind of came with a flash in the first season. They did kind of die off this season. They were kind of figured out and weren't quite at the level, and not enough to make playoff contention at all. But they still have a style of rugby that's engaging and fun to watch, and they're dangerous for any team that has to travel there as well, because it's a tough road to travel that far. But so that was
the Pro 14. The season is over.
2019. And Leinster champs of it. Hey.
Leinster champions.
Excellent.
Absolutely happy days.
Thank you very much for watching that video. If it's your first time here, please leave a like and subscribe down below, and leave a comment as well if you enjoyed it, because we enjoyed the conversation.